Welcome to our webinar. I'm Brittany Conrad, and on behalf of CMR Institute, I would like to thank you for joining. Today, we are hosting an expert discussion on selling to the C-suite, insights for medical device and diagnostic sales teams. For those of you not as familiar with CMR Institute, we train commercial sales teams to higher performance. We do this by utilizing off-the-shelf e-learning, application tools like business planning tools, coaching guides, and workshops to help ensure learning transfer, all of which can be customized to meet the goals of our clients. If you have questions throughout today's presentation, please type them in the webinar interface. We will address your questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A. Now I would like to welcome and turn it over to today's speakers, Alister Barrow and Robyn Collins. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it today. My name is Alister Barrow. I'm the principal consultant for Supplier Solutions for VantEdge One Group, on top of a few other things that I do in the healthcare world. But just a little bit about myself. I've been in the medical device industry for the last 20 years as a sales representative, a manager, an area vice president, trainer, corporate account director, and eventually a CEO. What we're planning to share with you guys today are some of the insights learned along the way. My background is also in health policy, so everything that has to do with value-based care today, I'm going to share a lot of that with you today. I'd like to also introduce my co-consultant, Robyn Collins. Robyn?
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. This is Robyn Collins. A little bit about my background. I have 30 years experience in medical device and pharmaceutical corporate world, working in areas of operations, national accounts, marketing, sales, and sales training. 20 of those 30 years were with Merck Pharmaceuticals and Guidant. At Guidant, we were focused on cardiovascular capital equipment, implantable and disposable medical devices. Guidant is now Boston Scientific and Abbott Vascular. Additionally, I worked with several startups, primarily focused on cardioperipheral vascular and infection prevention. So today, what we're going to be talking about is selling to the C-suite. And as you're selling value to C-suite executives, it's important that you meet your customers' strategic goals. You need to align your sales strategy with your customer's new buying strategy. It's important to target customers that fit your company's value proposition, and then to match your value-added services and products with their strategic goals. Together, establishing a common ground and a plan that you can work on to establish and maintain a long-term strategic partnership. Change is good. You go first. Change is never easy, but it's important, especially as the dynamics in a marketplace change. We're going to be doing some polling of the audience today to find out who we have on the call. Excuse me. We want to know who we have on the call and where you stand relative to some key issues. So the first polling question is, how knowledgeable are your company's sales teams on this shift from fee-for-service to value-based care? Are they very knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable, or not knowledgeable?
We'll give everyone a few minutes to answer the question. Go ahead and close the poll. Robyn, it looks like about 85% say they are somewhat knowledgeable.
Excellent. That's great. So we have some degree of knowledge. In order to have highly intelligent and effective conversations, our goal is to be very knowledgeable, if possible. So today we're going to talk about the changes and challenges in the marketplace and the implications for medical devices and diagnostics, and some of the things that we can do to address these changes, including new strategies and tactics, and also some tools we can provide to help support you with this transition. This is a very powerful slide which reinforces why it's critical to sell value and build long-term partnerships with the C-suite. As you can see here, The number of hospital administrators has grown 3,000% from 1970 to 2013, while the number of physicians has remained relatively flat. We know that for every one physician, there are 300 hospital administrators. What this slide also tells us that it's highly improbable that the decision-making power will ever shift back to the physician, clinician, anytime soon, if ever. So we know that this transition or changing of the guard has occurred over the past 30 years or so, but it's been accelerated the last 10 years as the result of changing market dynamics and changes in new legislation. The first critical change or introduction being the triple aim, with a focus on reduction in cost while improving quality and outcomes. Then in 2010, we had a monstrous change with the Affordable Care Act and the shift to value-based care and reimbursement. Another monumental impact was in 2013 when financial disclosure through the Sunshine Act became a mandate where physicians and providers were required to provide financial disclosure information relative to their relationships with the vendors. Important to our success is knowing the specific strategic initiatives for the C-suite executives at our targets accounts. In certain situations, they're going to be focused on population health initiatives, wanting to improve the health and wellness of their communities. They may be involved in diabetes prevention programs, patient screenings. They may be focused on patient demographics and offering additional services or enhanced services for older patients, potentially in orthopedics or cardiovascular area. They may be piloting different payment models. So in order to effectively engage with them in a partnership, we need to know precisely what their key strategic initiatives are. We at CMR Institute have a number of application tools available to help ensure that your sales teams have the tools they need in order to align your company strategies with their customers' goals. And this is just one example here. We also offer application modules online where they can build account management plans, and it helps them to walk through the process, build the plan, and then they can print it out and carry it with them to help maximize their success in the field. So what are the key takeaways? At the end of the day, what should we know? Number one, it's important that your selling strategy should be aligned with your customer's new buying strategy. You need to build your sales representatives into strategic account managers, selling value to the C-suite, not just specific products. Additionally, you want to enhance your sales team's understanding of the market changes even further, and also raise your business acumen of your customers' business needs.
Thanks, Robyn. Really appreciate it. Well, in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit about building your value proposition and also your go-to-market strategy to fit the value-based marketplace. But to start off, let me just ask this question. How effective has your leadership been in adopting a new value proposition to align with the changes in the marketplace? I'll give it a couple of minutes to answer that question.
The responses are coming in, Alister.
Okay.
Go ahead and close the poll. So this one is a little bit more split, with 50% saying not effective and about 36% saying somewhat effective and 14% very effective.
Right. All right. So I think we got a really good jumping off point then here, because the most important answers there was somewhat effective to not effective at all, and that was the majority of your numbers. In terms of building your value proposition, it's really important to express to you guys that it has nothing to do with your features and benefits. And that's the #1 mistake that we in the medical device community make when we try to meet with director level and executive level folks within the hospital system. We walk in and we share with them our features and benefits and represent it as our value proposition. And it's the easiest way to get ourselves not invited back for another conversation. In terms of defining your value proposition, what you really want to look at is you have to start with the customer's problem in mind. Really think of it from their perspective. What is their strategic initiatives, to Robyn's point, and getting into the C-suite? And then start there. And then from there, you need to ask yourself 4 questions in building your value proposition. What customer problem do you actually solve from those problems that you saw from your strategic initiatives? Which one do you solve? And then ask yourself, how do you specifically solve it? It can't just be a statement or a motto that you use. You really have to explain to these folks how you exactly solve this particular problem. How do you do it differently than your competitors and your customer? Because remember, your customer is not going to sit around just waiting for you to come in. They're actually trying to solve this problem themselves. So how do you fix it, do it differently than the competitors and the customer? And then finally, at the end of the day, and this is the most important piece in a value-based world, because everything has to be proven and measured. What's your proof? How do you measure it? How do I know what the return on investment is? And how do I report that so that I can get reimbursed in a value-based world? Let's go a little deeper into thinking about building out the framework of a value proposition. What does that look like? Here are some of the considerations, taking a look at the time frame to implement your product and service in helping us solve that challenging problem. How long does it take? What areas of the hospital are going to be affected by it? How many man hours am I going to have to commit to it? What other projects are going on at this point in time? And what am I going to have to shut down in order to jump on your project because it really helps us with our strategic initiative? What's your key target user look like? Who's your intended customer? That's a really important question, because I think from a vendor perspective, we've always gone at the market in terms of looking at the entire market. And that's really changed for us in the value-based world. We really need to start looking at our key strategic accounts that we really want to get into and get deep into the account and really help them all along the way. And really make a partner out of this to help us hit our forecasting goals. So who's your customer? What do they look like? And what problems does your company solve for them? What's the next best alternative? I think what's really changed in this particular marketplace, this value-based marketplace versus the fee-for-service, a volume-based marketplace, is that you really have to be more consultative. So they're looking for answers to their questions, but not just from your company. They also want to know what other companies can do this or can help you, who can come in and augment what you're doing now to help us really achieve our goals or help speed it up. So it's more about being a consultative partner with them to help them solve their problems. What's the value experience look like? That's a really, really important question, because I think everyone here on this phone can sort of attest to having worked for some what's perceived to be by our providers really good companies to work with, and what's perceived to be not so good. The experience of working with their particular company has not been good, or it has been great. So what's that value experience look like? And we really want to transform ourselves into making it a positive value experience. What's our value qualification really speaks to how we measure that. Because again, at the end of the day, in a value-based world, everything has to be reported, everything has to be measured, so in order for folks to get reimbursed properly. And then finally, what's your price? And you notice that I'll use price last. And the reason I do that is because in the value-based world, price really depends on what the customer sees as the value that you bring to their organization and what they're willing to pay for that particular value. So they can work with you to come up with a really good price in terms of what we're willing to pay here, the value that we see in you, our return on investment. It makes sense to pay this particular price, as opposed to the way that we have done it over the years in the fee-for-service world, where we used a cost-plus analysis. We take the price to make the product, we add a little bit extra for our gross profit margins, and that was our price. Our customers are no longer willing to work that way, especially in a capitated world where they're getting paid on an episode of care. So they'll get one set amount for a particular patient, and you do with it what you will, but once you run out, you're finished. That for them is really, really important. So your price has to depend on the value of your products and services. Digging a little bit further into the meat of creating a value proposition, let's talk about it a little bit. So just attacking it from the perspective of what's your core positioning statement? Let's start there. Tell us what exactly it is that provides the qualities that we would want to use to bring into our account to be able to solve our problems. And then what are the pillars that particular statement can stand on to really make sense and really stand you up within the facility. And then what's your tailored marketing content? I can't tell you how many IDNs and GPOs that Robyn and I speak to on a daily basis that say that one of the things that they hate the most is when sales reps or sometimes even executives from our vendor community come into big strategic meetings and they bring in the old glossy visuals from a particular product as opposed to tailored marketing content that speaks more to the company. I think the best way to think of that is in a fee-for-service world, it was easy to just go in and sell your product and talk about features and benefits. But in the value-based world, the customers, the providers, they're really purchasing your company. They're spending more time thinking about what your company can offer from both the product, services, and solutions perspective, and they're really buying the value of your company. So you need to have tailored marketing material to be able to speak to that. Lastly, in terms of thinking about the next step in building your value proposition, again, we have to get away from the features and benefits piece of it, and really start to create a culture within our organization that speaks to our value. So you need to build support for it around the organization. It needs to be a culture that you create within marketing, within sales and commercial operations. Everything you do starts to be built around value. And it can happen in transition. It doesn't have to happen overnight. And it can't happen overnight because that takes time and you need to develop it. What's the training and development plan and cadence that you can put in place to figure out how do you start to develop folks to bring them around to value? There's going to be a lot of convincing because there's still so much skepticism out in the marketplace from the vendor community in terms of what is actually necessary and what's changing. There are certain parts of the market that aren't changing so fast, and there are others that have already made the transition, and we're really drowning in trying to figure out what to do and how to get at those particular providers. And then ongoing measurement and development plans need to be in place. One of the number one reasons why sales folks leave organizations has nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with the fact that they don't feel like they're being developed. So developing your folks, it gives us an easy opportunity to put plans in place to start to develop folks to be able to sell a value proposition. At CMR Institute, we have tools, we have workshops, we have assessments that we can take to really start to help you develop those behaviors that you're looking for that hopefully will turn into habits for large account management strategies and really being able to speak to the value that your company can bring to a provider, not just the products. Some of the key takeaways, right? At the end of the day, what should I know? Really, in thinking about your portfolio, it's less about your product portfolio and more a thought process around a corporate portfolio. Again, we go back to the subject matter experts. When we speak to the IDNs and GPOs, what they're really looking to hear from folks is, here's what my company can do. Here are the products and services that we provide. We're willing to partner with you, and here's partner with you, and here's how it works. So really, what's the corporate portfolio? How do you bring some of that brain power into the provider organizations and really help us get at the challenges that the regulatory constraints have put in front of us? Customer issues your company can solve. What are the key ones that you can solve, and what does your key customer look like? Because again, I go back to the fact that all of the customers out there are not your customer. Because your value proposition will specifically fit a particular kind of customer. So align on account management activities as opposed to rep activities. They're looking for someone who can come in and be consultative from the top of the organization all the way down to the bottom. Proper market segmentation and account targeting is key because, again, picking the right customers, these are the folks that you're really going to invest time, money, and energy and people into so that you can have broader, deeper partnerships to help you hit those forecasting dollars. And then a communication plan needs to be developed and rolled out to the sales organization because, again, there are parts of the organization where this is not going to affect just yet, and there are other parts of the organization that really need this right now. And so what does the communication plan need to look like, developed, and rolled out to the correct parts of the organization that need to take this on as a challenge right now? All right, second piece in our go-to-market strategy. Before we do that, quick question for you guys. How supportive has your leadership been in providing you the tools you need to support the change in a value-based market? I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to think about that.
Let me go ahead and close the poll. This one looks like the majority is in the bottom two. So 46% saying not supportive, another 46 saying somewhat supportive, and only 8% saying very supportive.
Right. And so this has been the major challenge, right? In putting together a go-to-market strategy. It's been sort of a lot of more the same. And I think it's represented by the answers to that particular question. So the troubling piece about switching from volume to value is that a lot of sales organizations feel like it's a mantra. You can just give a mantra, or you can ask your training team to get the sales team ready, and you need to preach more value, and go from there. And all the weight of the world is on the shoulders of the trainers and managers out there to get their sales teams ready to be able to speak value. It really goes much, much deeper than that. In terms of putting together your go-to-market strategy, it really needs to be with your organization's business in mind, your organization's value in mind. So what has your organization done to get you prepared for value is probably the best way that I can think about it. And so everything needs to shift. Commercial operation needs to look different. Marketing needs to look different. We just spoke about that in the last segment, to create those sort of sales aids that you need to be able to speak to those folks. A development plan needs to be put in place. Sales compensation strategies need to be a little bit different. And for all the same reasons that you guys have been preaching about probably for the last, I don't know how many years, right? Because if you continue to pay folks, for instance, if we're just looking at compensation strategies, if you pay folks in the same way to go out and sell a widget, then there's no reasonable expectation that you should have that they're actually going to go upstairs and strike up a conversation about strategic initiatives. So the sales leadership teams really need to be involved. Next slide. In creating that value, the organizations out there that you guys are going after really look at their strategic initiatives in three major sections. We talked earlier about the triple aim, and cost, quality, and outcomes is all they're focused on. At this point in time, the most major strategic initiatives that are going on out there are preventable and avoidable readmissions. Right now, about half the hospitals in the United States have been hit with a readmission penalty to the tune of almost $600 million this year. That's real dollars coming out of their pocket today. That's a bill that they have to pay right away. What are your outcomes improvements? How do we improve the way that our patient population is experiencing and having outcomes in our hospital system today? And then device and surgical costs have to go down. We have to figure out a way to get them under control, which is to say, what's our contribution margin look like when using these particular products in a specific case? If we consider this is the amount of money we're going to get for each case. What they want to try and do is make sure that the device cost does not equal a large percentage of that particular procedure. So understanding Medicare readmission reduction models, understanding what ACOs and value-based payment models look like and what your ideal target customer is doing about it, and being able to get in bed with them and talk about how you can help them with that. And then standardization, how do you get involved in standardization projects with these folks? Because at the end of the day, we have to remember that the volume system paid folks for doing more, and value pays for doing much less. So standardization is key, and you want to be upfront with them in helping them be able to get themselves standardized. Next thing is the C-suite. I know a lot of folks say I want to get into the C-suite. And the problem is not getting into the C-suite. The problem is staying there. You will always get that first conversation with those folks, but you have to be really ready, really prepared, and so does the company, to be able to have really cogent and partnering conversations with these folks. What we tried to do in putting this particular slide together is sort of arrange it in a way that you would have to go through it in walking into the hospital. So in terms of selling your value to a hospital, a provider, or a hospital system, you would probably start with a director levels. You'd go out and you see the corporate supply chain folks. You'd probably talk to logistics or purchasing, or an IDN director or something like that. And if they found that what you had to offer them fit one of the strategic initiatives that they've been charged with working on, they may turf you to an executive. You might get to the VP of supply chain, VP of group purchasing, or CEO, CFO. You hope to get to that level. The next thing they would do is turf you to the department. If the CEO or CFO is really interested in your product, you end up at the department level, trying to convince those folks who are sort of the feet on the street to get the project done, that your product or your service that you've just convinced an executive is worthy, is now something that they can actually do. And then finally, at the end of the day, you need to see the folks that are actually going to put signature to that particular contract. The important thing to note on this particular slide is that the conversations, while you're maybe speaking about the exact same project, the conversations all along the way are completely different, because each person has to play a part in that particular strategic initiative, and it's important to touch those hot buttons, whatever they happen to be. So I go back to that question about having your sales representatives and account managers ready to actually speak to these folks. If we think about it from the perspective of just this slide, they have to have 4 or 5 different conversations on the same strategic initiative. That sometimes can be really, really tricky. And by the way, one person saying no along the way, along the chain here, can ruin an entire plan. The account management process, what does that need to look like? Once it's put in place, you need to profile that account. Really get out and start to look at the account from the top to the bottom. What are they doing? What are they working on? What are some of the strategic initiatives they're involved in? Are they buying land? Are they looking at population health management? Are they putting together presentations and slides for patients? Are they on some sort of marketing campaign? Or are they simply trying to get hospital-induced infection rates down? So really profile the account and figure out where their key initiatives are. Match your account goals with your value proposition, products and services that your company can bring to help them with whatever that strategic problem is. That guarantees you an opportunity for at least a conversation with those folks. You need to create an account plan. We showed you some of the tools and technology that we have to be able to help you to create an account plan, to put it together, because you actually have to become, if you will, a project manager to really be able to go from department to department, pull all the folks together and keep them all in line and on task to be able to get that strategic initiative done. Really, really difficult sometimes and can go awry along the way. Your relationship really needs to be through value-based collaboration. It really needs to be about the project. So gone are the days where we can go in and have conversations about your physician's tie. We really need to start having strategic conversations with these folks every time we go in about where we are in the project. What are we doing? What have we done so far? And how have we measured it? And what's been the success of it, so that we can keep the projects going. And remember, your project, your service, your particular product being instituted in cases being done with your particular product, that all takes time, and they're all competing with other projects that are going on in the hospital at the exact same time. And you want to make sure that you stay top of mind, because at any point in time, based on the budget or budget season, your project can be thrown out the window for something else that's much more pressing. Collaboration through price, products, programs, outcomes, and research. So, which is to say, everything that your company has to offer should be the goal of this particular account management process. So building your go-to-market strategy, what does that need to look like? First, your business plan of the organization needs to be in mind. So from a leadership perspective, what does the business plan of the organization look like? Who are we? What are we doing? What do we say we do? And how do we do it? It really needs to start with that. And it needs to be built around the value proposition and helping us to articulate what that value is that we bring. An understanding of the market that you're selling into is key, because each of the markets all across the United States are completely different. Some are on the exchange, some are not on federal exchanges, some have high populations of chronic disease, some do not. So really understanding the market that you're selling into and trying not to make it a uniform conversation within that particular market. The defined portfolio that you specialize in, really, what does your company do different than everyone else? Your branded products and capabilities. So your brand really is your promise to the market. What do you do, and what do people think of when they first see you? One of the ones I like to think of is Gillette, right? You think of Gillette, the first thing you think is the jingle. It's the best a man could get. So what do people think when they see you coming, when they see your company? Make sure that your products are appropriately priced. Remember, you have to price it from a value perspective, and remembering that in a value-based market, a lot of these folks are involved in alternative payment models, which cap them at a particular amount of dollars for whatever that procedure happens to be. So obviously, in terms of value-based purchasing, they cannot pay a nickel more for your product unless you can prove that it's worth paying that. It's going to drive down the cost or reduce infection rates, or the quality experience for the patient is going to be far superior than those of your competitors. Without that, they will not be able to pay anything more for your product than they're already paying for a competitor. Who's the team that you're going to train for this? What does the account management team need to look like in your organization? Does it consist of corporate account directors and managers? Or do you have really seasoned and professionally well-adjusted sales reps that can move up and be developed into an account management strategy where they're calling on C-suite and director level, being able to pull all the teams together? And then definitely at the end of the day, a compensation program that rewards your new behaviors. Otherwise, you'll never get out of this program what you're looking to get from it, because you really need to drive those behaviors and create those habits that you're looking for through your compensation strategy. Finally, again, we go back to some of the tools that CMR can provide to help you with that, help you start to develop and align your account management strategies, and really going back to Robyn's point from earlier, aligning your sales strategy with your customer's new buying strategy. So some of the key takeaways here at the end of the day. Again, I just said it. The best way to think about this is you're facing the market with a particular selling strategy. That selling strategy has to match the customer's buying strategy. If you're misaligned, you're probably not one of the folks that they really want to talk to, or you feel like you're trying to squeeze a round peg into a square hole, and your sales cycle becomes longer and longer and longer. The customer just does not fit, and you end up doing a lot more convincing than you're doing consultative selling. Account managers should know their roles, but they should also know the roles of everyone else on the sales team within that particular organization. Whether you have clinicals who are doing cases with the physicians, you have sales reps that might be doing presentations and demos, you have managers or executives from your company coming in to speak with the right folks. You should be almost like the quarterback on a football team, knowing what everyone needs to do and sort of directing everyone and keeping everyone in line. And then developing a plan for continual account management development. The market is changing, and it's changing every single day, especially with the new administration in place. What does that change look like? What has it done to your particular account? What has it done to your company? That change is happening every day. So you want to put a development plan in place that sort of speaks to that and gets everyone's business acumen up. But not only that, keeps them understanding that the market is changing, being able to have those conversations with their key customers and being able to provide them with that match that they're looking for in terms of the right products and services to get their problems solved.
Excellent. Thank you, Alister. You folks may be asking yourself, how do I go about implementing this at my organization? And we're proposing a rapid acceleration phased approach, with the first phase being focused on building your team's business acumen. We've got a couple of self-study programs, including one addressing healthcare reform and the implications for the medical device and diagnostics industry, as well as one focused on value-based care and the changing healthcare delivery model. We have also an optional workshop, Building Your Value Proposition.
Phase two, if you want to take it in phases, if you can't take it all at once, and a lot of organizations can't, you do have to have a phased approach to get it into your system, and also have it be a part of your culture. But phase two, transitioning your sales reps really to the account management phase, because they really have to move from just standing in a lab somewhere hoping to get their products used to more really consultative selling at all levels of the organization. So the e-learning modules that we recommend for those for phase two are strategies for effective account management. Really speaks to understanding the market that you're in and being able to sell in it effectively. And then selling in the hospital environment, which is changing every day. It sounds rudimentary, but really the environment has changed so drastically. It's important to understand what it looks like today versus what it looked like yesterday, and how you can become much more successful in it. And then the workshops that we recommend, either train the trainer or just an in-person workshop where we can roll it out to the entire team, is building a value-based go-to-market strategy.
Phase three is creating a value-based sales culture for your organization. And we've got a couple of self-study modules, including Inside the C-Suite, Lay of the Land, which focuses on the roles and responsibilities of the different executives in the C-Suite. The other is Inside the C-Suite, Getting a Seat at the Table. Combination of how to profile accounts and prepare for the meeting, also some suggestions on tactically how to get in, and then once you get in and conduct the discussions with the C-Suite executives, how to earn the right to come back. We also have an optional reinforcement workshop entitled Inside the C-Suite, Getting a Seat at the Table.
So really, your rapid acceleration is based purely on building a new value-based value proposition, really moving from features and benefits of your product to the value of your company. The second thing we do is help you build a value-based go-to-market strategy. This is what value looks like to our company, and here's how we can help you with your problems. And then getting inside the C-suite, getting in and staying there, getting a seat at the table with the right folks at the right time, having the right products and service to be able to present to them. So in summary, before we close and open the line up for some questions, really fee for service, I think the best way to look at it and to try and understand it is, we sold more, they bought more, they used more, they made more, and we made more as well. Whereas in the value-based world, healthcare rewards providers now for doing much, much less. So it's all about the quality of doing the procedure one time and getting paid to do it well. Clinical customers have a responsibility to the department, and I have to read this one because you can't say it any better. Executives that you meet have a responsibility to an entire organization. And so when you show up to those folks, you want to make sure that you are understanding what the organization is trying to do, as opposed to coming in and having a departmental conversation with them. It's the easiest way not to be invited back to the C-suite. Your company's selling strategy, we've said it several times, it has to match the customer's new buying strategy. It is new, and sometimes it feels like it's not even settled. It's still morphing, and that may be the case based on where regulations are today. But whatever it ends up settling in, you have to be able to morph and change your selling strategy to fit that new buying strategy. And then sales representatives, from the IDNs and GPOs we talk to, they tell us all the time, we no longer want them. We're looking for consultants. We're looking for account managers, because guess what? We are not exactly sure how to do this ourselves. So we're looking for account managers who can come in and successfully help us strategize by using their company's products and services to solve our problems. All right, I think we'll stop there and open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, that sounds good, Alister. Questions have been coming in. So the first question for Robyn and Alister is, Catherine wants to know, how do you convince your leadership to support making a change to value-based care or about a value-based sales message.
Okay. Robyn, you want to take that one, or you want me to take that one?
Go for it, Alister. No.
Yeah, that's one of the toughest questions. That's one of the questions that we get the most because a lot of sales organizations are being asked, or at least the training departments, are being asked to take on an increasingly high burden in training the sales force to speak to a value-based world. However, they're not necessarily being given the tools that are necessary to actually make it happen, or the support from top to bottom within the within the organization to make it happen. So one of the things that I would say is, first, recognize the enormous amount of power that you have in being asked to do that. The very next thing that I would do, and I was a sales trainer for quite some time, one of the things that I would ask for is, well, what does my budget look like, is the first thing to take a look at. And secondarily, in order to do that, to do value-based training, here are the tools that I need. You need to have some sort of platform where we can start to teach our folks what the marketplace looks like and how to get market access. And then we also need the strategies and tactics that someone can come in and help us with to start to arrange ourselves in a way that presents value. And how do we do that? It's not an easy sell, but it does involve you sort of starting a campaign and really working with other departments within your organization. Marketing needs to be involved because you really have to have the correct sales aids for the executive level. Commercial operations needs to be involved because you really need to have the right strategy and the right compensation models in place for the folks that you have decided are necessary to be account managers. It won't happen across the organization, but there are specific areas of the organization, depending upon where sales reps sit in the country, that definitely need value-based care. And so speaking in that particular way is really, really important. I think when leadership doesn't want to get on board, it's because the presentation typically is in all or nothing. We're going to do value for everyone, or we're not going to do value at all. And that's an overwhelming proposition for a leadership team, especially when you got to keep the lights on within the organization. If you try a phased approach in terms of where value is hitting you guys the most throughout the country, and starting with small tiger teams, if you will, and putting together account managers in those specific areas, it's a much better sell to a leadership team that's thinking about the revenue structure for an entire organization.
Great answer, Alister. I think also we can offer to come in and to support you with the efforts with your leadership team. Happy to come in and do some training with them as well.
Great. Another question, a great question from Charles just came in. He wants to know, what about smaller and more innovative organizations that don't have a large product portfolio? What advice do you guys have for Charles?
I'll go ahead and take this one, Alister.
Okay.
In situations where you are one product company or only have a few products, the goal is to provide value. So if you can identify value-added services or companies that offer value-added services to augment your product line, you can provide those as a way to partner with the C-suite. There are a number of different companies that offer solutions that your customers may be looking for that you can partner with at little or no expense in order to win with them and with the C-suite executives. Alister, any other thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Robyn. Just expounding on that a little bit. One of the things that Robyn and I find from working with smaller organizations is there really is a box mentality that we have to get them out of. Really, the best way to approach your accounts, especially when you may only have one particular product, is to take advantage of the size of your organization, in that you're free to roam around and find some of those partners out there that you can partner with to bring them into your provider and help them with their problems. It makes it much easier for you to be able to navigate that, make those decisions quickly, and partner with those folks to bring them in, as opposed to thinking you need to do it all by yourself. A lot of the projects that Robyn and I are exposed to within the hospital system, we find that most of them are never done with one company. they're usually done with 2, 3, sometimes 4 different companies attacking a problem and working at it from different angles. Many of them are not partnered together, but it's the easiest way for you to match up with the big boys that may have multiple portfolio lines.
Great. Another question from Kevin. He wants to know, where do I go to find out more from my customers? Who can tell me what their pain points are?
Robyn, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll start, and always value your augmenting what I have to say, Alister.
Sure.
One of the quickest and easiest ways to do so is to go on to the website of a particular provider or hospital.
You're breaking up a little bit, Robyn.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. The hospital or provider's website usually outlines what their key strategic initiatives or goals are. Also, you can always get access to the hospital's annual report, which should outline their strategic initiatives. Other thoughts, Alister?
Yeah, one of the things that the Affordable Care Act has done is it has created hundreds, or I shouldn't even qualify it that way. I should just say multiple different jobs and job titles within provider organizations that are specifically put there to work on quality metrics. So directors of quality or your medical directors. You can find out a ton of information for these from these folks. Chief nursing officer are put in place. Chief strategy officer. All of these folks are put in place specifically to go at all of these strategic initiatives that the Affordable Care Act has provided for them. And so their job is to make sure that the departments are implementing them, they're thinking about them, they're providing the departments with the necessary information for where they are along the continuum of getting those projects completed. So they are the best source of information. But remember, for approaching those folks, they're really going to want to talk with you about what your products, what your company's value proposition is, because it won't just be informational. You don't want to just sit them down and interrogate them. You want to be able to also offer some solutions for them. They are the easiest route to getting on a value analysis committee meeting or a MEAC committee meeting or getting in front of an executive.
Another great question came in. It says, if the ACA is repealed, will hospitals go back to the old way of doing things?
That's a great question, and it's probably the question that Rob and I get the most when we're working with the vendors out there. The short answer to your question is no. The longer answer to your question is, over the course of the last 5 years, what has come out of the Affordable Care Act in terms of savings to CMS, while it has not blown anyone out of the water, it has shown that it's been effective in slowing the rate of growth in healthcare expenditures. Once they figured that out, there was no way that they're going to go back. So even if portions of the ACA get repealed or changed or what have you, this move from volume to value is not turning around. It's going in this particular direction. So one way or another, you're going to end up having to deal with a value-based customer, even if the full Affordable Care Act is not fully implemented.
Another question is, if I don't have a study or data to support a value proposition, what else should I look for, and what else could I offer a company?
Robyn, you want to take that one?
Sure. I mean, there are a number of value-added services that your company can offer that do not necessarily require that you provide any data, but they just provide services to support your hospital. One example would be if the hospitals focus on population health initiatives and your organization is able to support their efforts in patient screenings or diabetes prevention programs, et cetera. That's something that you don't have to have data for, but would provide value to an organization that's focused on that. Alister, other thoughts?
Yeah, there were some really innovative programs and projects that are going on throughout healthcare today in a way that we've never seen it before. What I mean by that is, in the past, your providers were mainly focused on patient health. That was what they do all day, every day, and that's all they thought about. Today, they're also focused on revenue. So they're doing some really interesting things around revenue, like partnering with smaller vendors that don't necessarily have white papers and studies, and they're offering to do studies with them. There are a lot of providers out there that are also involved in product development, and who knows product development better than we do? And they would love to partner with vendors out there who can help them with a commercialization strategy or an incubation strategy. How do we get it from the thought process to actually getting it to be sold, and would you be willing to partner with us? So really it does cause you to think way outside the box. But these projects are happening all over the country today, and there are a lot of vendors that are not taking advantage of them. But simply by asking what's going on, are there research institutes being developed? And how do I get clued into those? Are great ways to get your product in, and even if you don't have a study, to be able to get one going within those institutions.
There are also innovative companies that offer services for inventory control management, and your organization could partner with one of those companies if that was of interest to that specific provider.
Those are all great suggestions. Brian wants to know, what do you see as the single most basic need that a medical device company must address right away based on the current market?
Robyn, you want to take that one, or you want me to take it?
Sure. I think Alister would agree on this, that the number one need to address is business acumen, or having your team understand healthcare reform and the implications for the medical device and diagnostics industry. In order to have intelligent, value-based conversations with the new decision makers and including the C-suite executives, you need to know what's happened to get us where we are today and what's happening on almost a daily basis. Other thoughts, Alister?
Yeah, I do have a couple of other thoughts. One is that, again, we go back to the IDNs and GPO folks and hospital executives that we speak to on a daily basis. What we hear is that we don't understand it as well, and we're hoping that our sales representatives or account managers understand it so that they can help us through it. The number one source of information, there's been a lot of studies out there for physicians and clinicians within a provider organization, has been the sales rep. Sales reps are used to bringing a ton of really good information for those folks. That shouldn't change. And that's what they're expecting. And so what we see as a deficiency is the fact that folks come in and they're sometimes they're less clued in to what's happening in the marketplace than the providers they hope to help with their problem. And that's a real challenge that we can help fix right away.
Good point. We have time for one last question. Susan wants to know, how do you specifically suggest I approach my marketing group with this message? What tips do you have for me?
Robyn, you want to grab that one?
No, go for it, Alister.
Yeah. So remember that marketing groups are looking for initiatives to get involved in every day as well. As evidenced by the fact that you've probably got marketing sales aids that have come in your mail that you still haven't even opened. So those, I use that as an example to say many of us have been with sales organizations where we've gotten so much stuff in the mail that we don't really use any of it, or we end up using some of it. The fastest way to get those folks on board is to help them understand their role in switching from volume to value. Those folks are keenly aware of what's going on around the country because they have to put together so many stratification plans, and they also have to work with so many sales reps out in the marketplace to help them decide what is the best sales aid or what is the best iteration of a sales aid that needs to change to be able to provide for the sales force. So the easiest way to work with those folks is to really engage them and help them understand what you've been charged with in terms of trying to develop the sales force into a value-based sales force, and what are the tools that are necessary for those folks. You're going to be speaking to a whole new customer base, not just the clinician, and here's what that customer base requires, and really take them through that process and have them help you, and even having them come out into the marketplace with you and speak to some of those executives. They're more than happy to share with them what they're looking for when a sales organization enters their doors.
Any other thoughts, Robyn?
No, I think Alister did a great job, as usual.
Okay, well, great. Well, we've had some great questions from the audience today, but I believe it's time to wrap up. So I'd like to thank our panelists for their time today. Thank you, Robyn.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Brittany.
Thank you, Alister.
Yeah, thank you very much for providing the platform, and thank you all for joining us.
I would also like to thank our participants for joining. If you have any questions about today's webinar or CMR Institute's learning programs, please contact CMR at the number or email on your screen. Thanks again and have a great day.